Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. So this lesson is about the third poem in the collection of Natasha Trethewey, Native God, uh, which is Genus Narcissus. So genus Narcissus may first appear to readers as the scientific name for daffodils. This genus encompasses a variety of flowering plants, including daffodils and paperwhites. The name Narcissus is actually derived from the Greek myth of Narcissus, linking the flower's name to themes of beauty and reflection. So, the myth of Narcissus refers to a story from Greek mythology about a beautiful youth named Narcissus who became so infatuated with his own reflection in a pool of water that he was unable to look away. Consumed by his self love, he eventually wasted away and was transformed into a flower that now bears his name, the narcissus, which is commonly associated with the flowers daffodils. So, interestingly, the connection between the flower and the myth may be symbolic. In ancient interpretations, the drooping shape of some daffodils can resemble a figure bowing to look at its reflection, much like the character of Narcissus in the myth when he was bowing to look at his own reflection in the pool of water. So, therefore, in Genus Narcissus, Natasha Trethewey draws on this myth both directly and metaphorically. How directly? The daffodils themselves, part of the genus Narcissus, link the poem to the myth. And how metaphorically? The speaker sees in the daffodils a reflection of their own youthful pride and vanity, similar to Narcissus gazing at his reflection. So the daffodil's short-lived bloom parallels the short-lived nature of life and beauty, underscoring the poem's meditation on impermanence and self-awareness. So consequently, the brief blooming season of the daffodils aligns with the themes of transience and mortality present in both the myth and Trethewey's poem. So the myth symbolizes themes such as vanity, self obsession, and the dangers of excessive self admiration. It also explores the interplay between beauty, desire, and mortality as Narcissus' fixation leads to his downfall and death. Immediately following the title is an epigraph referencing a poem by Robert Herrick. And what is that epigraph saying? Fair daffodils, we weep to see you haste away so soon. So the author includes this in reference and comparison to her mother. Trethway feels robbed by the loss of her mother, and like so many others who have been through loss, feels her mother was taken too soon, much like a deathbill. Genus Narcissus is about when Natasha would walk home from school and pick daffodils for her mother because she could see herself in them. But daffodils live a short spring, and Natasha made that connection with her mother's early death. Let us go in details of the epigraph. Immediately following the title is an epigraph referencing a poem by Robert Herrick. Fair daffodils, we weep to see you haste away so soon. The epigraph from Herrick mourns the brief life of daffodils, a metaphor for human mortality. The author includes this in reference and comparison to her mother. Trethway feels robbed by the loss of her mother, and like so many others who have been through loss, feels that her mother was taken too soon, much like a daffodil. It sets the tone for Trethway's meditation on impermanence and connects the short lived beauty of daffodils to the briefness of life itself. Let us now begin with the poem. The road I walked home from school was dense with trees and shadow, creekside, and lit by yellow daffodils' early blossoms. The speaker recalls a path surrounded by nature, where daffodils stood out with their vibrant yellow amidst the dim and shadowed landscape. The daffodils are a visual focal point symbolizing beauty and renewal, yet their presence also hints at impermanence. In the mythological sense, their brightness can reflect the appeal of Narcissus' beauty, which captivated even himself. Trethewey is using the road as a symbol for her life, while she can be using the trees and shadows as symbols for her abusive stepfather. However, she juxtaposes this image with the description of the road being lit by yellow daffodils, which is obviously a symbol for her mother. Treadway includes this imagery to show the constant psychological war she faced when it came to her home life. Therefore, the daffodils in the beginning of the poem represent a bright comfort from the narrator's dark surroundings. Next line. Bright against winter's last grey days, I must have known they grew wild, thought no harm in taking them, so I did. So the daffodil's brightness contrasts with winter's dullness, symbolizing hope at the end of a difficult season. However, it can be seen in an opposite manner as well. Through this structure, she is anticipating a sad ending as well when she says winter's last grey days. The speaker's act of picking daffodils seems innocent, but is loaded with symbolic weight. From the scientific perspective, it disrupts their natural environment, hinting at the fragility of beauty when removed from its context. From the mythological perspective, this act mirrors Narcissus' self centered act of gazing at his reflection, unaware of the consequences. Next lines. Gathering up as many as I could hold, then presenting them in a jar to my mother. She put them on the sill, and I sat nearby. The speaker gathers the daffodils greedily, much like Narcissus becomes fixated on his reflection. The gift to her mother reflects an act of love, but also an unconscious assertion of pride. In placing the flowers on the sill, the speaker inadvertently creates a reflection. Light bending through the glass mirrors Narcissus' pool of water, reinforcing the theme of self awareness and vanity. Further explanation to it would be that when the daffodils are placed in the jar on the windowsill, the light passing through the glass creates a refracted or distorted image, much like Narcissus sees his reflection in the pool of water. This bending of light evokes the myth of Narcissus, where the reflection in the water captivates him. Here, the image created on the windowsill becomes an unintended metaphor for self awareness and vanity. Consequently, the speaker, though a child, creates a scenario that mirrors Narcissus' experience. The reflection created by the light is symbolic of self awareness. The speaker sees in the daffodils a part of herself, her desire for recognition and appreciation. The vanity lies in the unconscious identification with the daffodils. Like Narcissus, who becomes hooked with his reflection, the speaker's act of giving flowers is partly motivated by a subconscious desire to showcase her own generosity or aesthetic sense. This connection between the daffodils, the light, and the speaker emphasizes how beauty and pride can become intertwined. It also foreshadows the eventual realization of how transient such beauty and the pride which is derived from it truly is, tying into the overarching themes of impermanence and self awareness. With this, we're going to move on to the next line. Watching light bend through the glass, day easing into evening, proud of myself for giving my mother some small thing. So the speaker's pride in the act of giving parallels the self admiration in Narcissus' gaze at his own reflection. The bending light through the glass evokes distortion, a subtle reminder of how perceptions of beauty, self worth, and memory are never entirely clear or stable. The phrase proud of myself for giving my mother some small thing portrays how engulfed she was as a child in these sweet flowers and the fact that she was able to give her mother something so small that she would love so much. Next lines. Childish vanity, I must have seen in them some measure of myself. The slender stems each blossom a head lifted up. Okay, so So the speaker reflects on the youthful self-centeredness, comparing themselves to the daffodils. The daffodils' slender stems and heads lifted up mirror both the graceful beauty of the flowers and Narcissus' proud, self-admiring posture. The speaker recognizes this parallel in hindsight, linking the flower's form to their own ego. She called her actions her childish vanity, showing that as a child she vainly thought of the flowers to represent herself when she gave them to her mother. In a way, it suggests that, as stated, it is childish of the speaker to compare herself to the daffodils because the point when they seem to grow up is when their mother dies and the daffodils also die. Therefore, all of it might suggest that the daffodils didn't actually symbolize the narrator, rather the mother. With this, we will move on to the next line, which is toward praise or bowed to meet its reflection. Walking home those years ago, I knew nothing of Narcissus or the daffodil's short strain. Okay, Ji. So the daffodil's dual posture, either upright, seeking praise, or bowing towards their reflection, parallels Narcissus's double fixation. One, desiring admiration, and second, obsessively gazing at his reflection. The speaker, as a child, was unaware of these mythological or symbolic associations, but as an adult, they recognized the connection between vanity and impermanence. Her youth and impulsivity of life's enjoyments is cut short with the death of her mother, as indicated in the line The Daffodils, Short Spring. As they dry up beside the grave of her mother, as stated in the next verse, her childhood innocence dies as she learns to live without her mother from a young age. Okay, next lines. How they would dry like graveside flowers, rustling when the wind blew, a whisper treacherous from the sill, be taken with yourself. So the dried daffodils, resembling flowers left at a grave, symbolize death and decay. The dried petals rustling in the wind are personified as whispering, giving them an eerie, almost emotional quality. This whisper can be interpreted as a symbolic warning, perhaps a caution to the speaker or the reader about the fleeting nature of beauty, the dangers of pride, or the inevitable decay tied to the passage of time. Now, how is it connected to Narcissus? In the myth of Narcissus, his fixation on his own reflection ultimately leads to his demise. Similarly, the whispering flowers seem to carry the weight of this cautionary tale. Becoming too absorbed in oneself or one's beauty can lead to destruction. The daffodils, now lifeless, seem to speak of the consequences of such fixation, acting as a reminder of the myth's moral lesson. The daffodils, which were once vivid symbols of life and beauty, are now dried and lifeless. So we can see over here that how it is connected to Narcissus. How Narcissus' life in the beginning was vibrant, like the daffodils in the beginning, and how it ended up as a decay, like the daffodils in the end. So the daffodils, which were once vivid symbols of life and beauty, are now dried and lifeless. This transformation mirrors the arc of Narcissus' life. His initial allure and beauty contrast starkly with his ultimate demise. Their physical decay symbolizes the transient nature of all beauty and life, emphasizing the inevitability of change and loss. The flower's decay can feel like a betrayal to the speaker, as they no longer hold the vitality they once did. This parallels how time and mortality inevitably betray human efforts to preserve beauty or perfection. Narcissus, too, was betrayed by his own obsession with his reflection, as it led to his untimely death. In conclusion, the dried daffodils whispering from the windowsill serve as powerful symbols of transience, mortality, and the consequences of vanity. Their decay aligns with the myth of Narcissus, transforming them into cautionary figures that remind both the speaker and the reader of the inevitability of loss and the dangers of excessive self focus. The interplay of symbolism, myth, and imagery enriches the poem's meditation on beauty, pride, and impermanence. With this, we move on to the last line of the poem. Be taken with yourself. Be taken with yourself, they said to me. Die early to my mother. So the daffodils imagined voice delivers two warnings to the speaker. They caution against being overly self absorbed, echoing the fate of Narcissus. And to the speaker's mother, they seem to foretell her untimely death, linking the fleeting life of daffodils to human mortality. The juxtaposition of these warnings intertwines vanity and loss, connecting the myth of Narcissus with the natural life cycle of the daffodil. Be taken with yourself is a message from the dying flowers that she might have been too selfish during her mother's life and needed to lift her head up from her own reflection. In order to sustain her relationships and her own identity in relation to others, she needs to be focused on the happiness she brings others rather than the happiness she brings herself. So this line, be taken with yourself, they said to me, die early to my mother. This line also portrays the different interpretations two people can have on one topic. To Natasha, these flowers were beautiful and bright, and in a manner like to Narcissus, reminded her of her beauty, with their blossom held high. But to Natasha's mother, the daffodils spoke of an early death because they bloom in late winter and die soon into the spring. So the verse captures the dual warnings the daffodils impart. For the speaker, the flowers symbolize the need to balance self reflection with attentiveness to others, cautioning against being consumed by pride or self absorption. For her mother, the daffodils with their brief bloom foretell life's transience, reflecting the fragility of human existence. This interpretation highlights how a single image, the daffodils, can evoke deeply personal and deviating meanings, interweaving themes of vanity, loss, and the fleeting nature of both beauty and life. How are we going to conclude this? By weaving together the scientific and mythological connotations of Narcissus, Trethewey explores themes of beauty, self awareness, and mortality. The daffodils symbolize both the allure and transience of life, while the connection to the myth adds a layer of cautionary wisdom about vanity and self obsession. The poem's layered meaning encourages readers to reflect on the fleeting nature of beauty and the inevitable passage of time. With this, we move on to the themes that are present in this poem. First theme, which is very permanent, is the impermanence of life and beauty. The daffodils, with their brief blooming season, symbolize the fleeting nature of life and beauty. Trethewey reflects on their short existence, paralleling it with human mortality and the impermanence of moments in life, such as the speaker's childhood innocence and her relationship with her mother. The second theme would be vanity and self reflection. So, vanity is what? Excessive pride. So, drawing from the myth of Narcissus, the poem explores the human tendency towards vanity and self absorption. The speaker's childhood pride in giving the daffodils mirrors Narcissus' admiration for his reflection. This vanity is presented as both innocent, a child seeking approval, and cautionary as well, a potential danger of self centeredness. The third theme would be mortality and loss. The dried daffodils likened to graveside flowers evoke the inevitability of death. This theme is deeply personal in the poem.
as the speaker reflects on her mother's mortality, hinted at in the closing line. The connection between the transience of the flowers and the speaker's eventual awareness of loss ties personal memory to universal truths. The next theme is memory and nostalgia. The poem is steeped in reflective nostalgia. The speaker revisits a childhood memory, contrasting her innocent perceptions at the time with the wisdom and complexity of adulthood. The act of revisiting this memory becomes a meditation on how time and perspective reshape it. With this, we move on to the symbols that are present in this poem. The first symbol is daffodils or the genus Narcissus. The daffodils are central to the poem and they carry multiple layers of symbolism. The first idea which it generates is the fleetingness. Their short blossoming season, their short blooming season represents the fleeting nature of life and beauty. It also symbolizes the vanity, the pride, the excess pride of Narcissus and the myth behind Narcissus. Their genus name connects them to the mythological figure symbolizing self-obsession and pride. Okay, what else does it symbolize? It also symbolizes innocence and childhood. To the child speaker, the daffodil symbolize a small, pure act of love for her mother, tied to the childhood innocence and naivety. The next symbol over here is reflection. The bending light through the jar's glass mirrors the mythological pool of water where Narcissus saw his reflection. This idea symbolizes vanity and the distortions of memory and perception. Third symbol is windowsill. The daffodils placed on the windowsill act as both a literal and symbolic boundary. Literally, they are placed where light transforms them. Symbolically, they mark the threshold between life and death, beauty and decay, innocence and maturity. The fourth symbol is dried flowers which were present at the gravesite. The dried daffodils symbolize death and inevitability of decay. Their rustling whispers serve as a metaphorical voice, cautioning the speaker about self centeredness and reminding her of mortality, both her mother's and her own. The fifth and the last symbol present over here is the whisper. The imagined whisper of the flowers symbolize an inner voice of reflection and the haunting nature of memory. It suggests the daffodils carry a dual warning: the dangers of vanity and the inevitability of death. With this, we move on to the literary devices present in this poem. The first literary device, which is very visible in this poem, is the imagery. And there are two kinds of imagery present in this poem. The first one is visual imagery, the second one is auditory imagery. What are the examples of the visual imagery? The road I walked home from school was dense with trees and shadow, creekside, and lit by yellow daffodils, early blossom. So the reader can visualize the shaded path illuminated by the vibrant yellow of the daffodils, symbolizing beauty amidst bloom. So watching next visual imagery is watching light bend through the glass. This creates an image of refracted light, evoking both a sense of wonder and distortion. The example of auditory imagery present over here is rustling when the wind blew, a whisper treacherous from the sill. The dried flowers create a subtle sound that adds a haunting, eerie quality to the poem. The second literary device present over here is symbolism. The daffodils reflection windowsill. The daffodils, the reflection, the windowsill, and the dried flowers. They symbolize vanity, mortality, and transience, as discussed earlier. These symbols deepen the emotional and philosophical layers of the poem. The third literary device is metaphor. Trethewey uses metaphors to draw comparisons that enrich the poem. First metaphor is dry like graveside flowers. So the dried daffodils are metaphorically linked to the funeral flowers, symbolizing death and loss. Second metaphor, be taken with yourself, die early. So the daffodils metaphorically over here warn against vanity and foreshadow mortality, connecting human flaws with natural cycles. Fourth literary device is personification. Trethewey gives human qualities to the daffodils. Be taken with yourself, they said to me. Die early to my mother. So the flowers are personified as if they can speak, offering warnings and reflection. This heightens the emotional impact, making nature an active participant in the speaker's self analysis. The fifth literary device present over here is allusion. So the poem alludes to Greek mythology, okay, and it also alludes to Herrick's poem. Greek mythology, the myth of Narcissus is embedded in the poem through the daffodil's genus named Narcissus. This allusion provides a framework for exploring vanity and self reflection. The second allusion is to the epigraph, which was taken from Herrick's poem. The epigraph quotes Robert Herrick's poem to daffodils, creating connection between two texts that reinforces themes of impermanence and mourning. The sixth literary device that is present over here is enjambment. Trethewey uses enjambment, continuing lines without punctuation breaks, to create a flowing conversational tone. The road I walked home from school was dense with trees and shadow, creekside, and lit by yellow daffodils' early blossom. So the lack of pauses in the end of the verses mirrors the continuity of memory and reflection, allowing the ideas to spill over from one line to the next. The seventh literary device that is present over here is contrast. Trethewey contrasts light and shadow, youth and age, beauty and decay. Right against winter's last grey days, juxtaposes the daffodils' vibrancy with the bleakness of winter, highlighting their fleeting brilliance. The transition from flesh blossoms to dried graveside flowers underscores the contrast between life and death. The next literary device is irony. There is a poignant irony in the daffodils' dual messages. The flowers embody beauty and vitality, but also warn of the consequences of vanity and the inevitability of death. The speaker's childhood pride in gifting the daffodils contrasts with her adult realization of their symbolic weight. Then there is juxtaposition over here as well, which is the ninth literary device. Childhood innocence over here is juxtaposed with adult reflection. The speaker's pride as a child contrasts with the mature recognition of vanity and mortality. Natural beauty is contrasted or juxtaposed with decay. The fresh daffodils on the sill are later linked to the graveside flowers, evoking the passage from life to death. With this, we move on to the form, meter, and the rhyme scheme of this poem. The form of this poem is free verse. The poem does not adhere to a rigid structure or rhyme scheme, which allows Trethewey to weave together past and present reflections seamlessly. This choice mirrors the fluidity of the memory as the speaker's thoughts shift between her childhood experience and her adult understanding of its significance. One more thing that comes under form is the structure of the stanza. The poem is composed of tercets, the three-line stanza, a structure that gives it a balanced and orderly appearance despite the lack of rhyme or meter. This controlled form contrasts with the thematic focus on impermanence and mortality, subtly emphasizing the tension between structure and transience. Then we end up with the meter. The meter, as I suggested earlier, is free verse. Therefore, the meter is irregular. There is no consistent metrical pattern in the poem. The line lengths vary, creating a natural conversational rhythm that reflects the speaker's introspection. For instance, the opening lines: "The road I walked home from school was dense with trees and shadow, creekside and lit by yellow daffodils' early blossom." These lines flow with a prose-like rhythm, reinforcing the narrative and reflective tone. At times, the rhythm slows to emphasize key ideas such as "Be taken with yourself, they said to me, die early to my mother." The conciseness and abruptness of these lines create a dramatic and serious pause. The last thing that is going to be shared over here is the rhyme scheme present in this poem. As suggested earlier, that this is a free verse, therefore there is no rhyme scheme present in this poem. So the absence of rhyme allows the poem to focus on its themes and imagery rather than the constraints of sound patterns. This lack of rhyme emphasizes the unpredictability of life and the fleeting nature of beauty, aligning with the poem's meditation on trance. With this, we end the explanation of this poem. I hope you have understood everything. If there are any questions, you can approach me freely.